Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Talking, thinking, location Red Keep. He walked down the corridor to the hall of the small council. The king had called for a meeting, and it sounded important. What is happening now? He asked himself. He had been eating dinner when he got the summons by note. He had only been the master of laws for a few years under King Rhaegar, but that had not been the first time he had met the king. That would have been after he returned from Essex. It all started when he fell in love with Tisha, a cobbler's daughter, and married her in secret. His parents had soon found out, and his wife was brought before them with him alongside her. He and his father had gotten into an argument about Tisha, and he made the mistake of pointing out that Tisha had married for love, just like he did. To this day, he still believed that the only reason that he hadn't been struck was because his mother was there in the same room. So his father had restrained himself, and instead told that if he wanted to keep this marriage, he would have to earn it. He ordered Tyrion to Essos to find his uncle Jurian, who had gone looking for Brightroar, the ancestral Valyrian steel sword of House Lannister, but his wife would have to stay there. He agreed, but he didn't trust his father with keeping Tisha safe. So on the night before he was to sail, he had her smuggled onto the ship he would be using. He had it on good authority that his mother had known and said nothing until they were safely in Essos. They had spent the 5 years together looking for Jaren in Essos and beyond. The journey was a mixture of successes and failures. He had found his uncle, but even though he had been successful in finding Brightroar, he was also dying. Tasha had given birth to his son a month prior, but she had died in childbirth fever. He had been grieving for her when he found his uncle and hadn't even looked at his son, who was being tended to by a wet nurse he had managed to find. But after finding his uncle Jerion, staying with him as he finally breathed his last, he finally looked upon his son and named him for the uncle he had lost. He took his son, his uncle's bones, and Brightroar back to Westeros. He stopped at King's Landing and went to the Red Keep to give Brightroar to Jaime. He would have better use of it, and then went home to Casterly Rock. If his father had been mad at him for giving Brightroar to Jaime, sad to see his brother's bones, or happy to see he had a successor, he did not show it when he had learned about these things. But his mother had whispered to Tyrion that he was a little proud of what his son had done. Despite not hearing it from his father's lips, Tyrion took it as praise. It was only 2 years later that he was given an offer to come to King's Landing as an aide to the Master Laws. He went there, and within 3 years he was the Master of Laws to King Rhaegar. To his surprise, he found that he enjoyed the game and played it just as well as the others. People looked down at him for being a dwarf, and while it did hurt a little, he never let it show. But it was only a few years into his term as Master of Laws when the king had died from a sickness. Once he had been cremated, the Crown Prince became King Aegon, the sixth of his name. Queen Lyanna stayed at court but acknowledged the fact her time as the ruling queen was done with, and that honor, some would say burden, fell to Queen Asha and Queen Maya. Her choice to do so had Tyrion's respect. Sometimes he wondered if she and Mother would get along. He didn't know if they did. Still, he served as Master of Laws, and now he was being called upon by the king because of that. He walked down the corridor, keeping his gaze forward as he passed courtiers and ladies, ignoring the looks and whispers that came after him. He didn't let it show that he felt that the words stung. He would not show weakness, but he was glad that he had left Jerion at Casterly Rock. He turned and walked into a corridor that seemed to be empty, but as he walked down it, a voice spoke. "Have you been doing well here, Halfman?" it asked him. He turned to see where the voice had come from and saw a person in a dirty cloak standing against the wall. The voice had sounded like it was full of rust, but it had been the voice of a man. "You are the ghost of the North," he said, looking at the cloaked man. There was a small hope that he would surprise the ghost, but to his disappointment, the ghost didn't seem surprised. "And you're the half-man of the Westerlands," he replied. "And don't look so disappointed. I know you read, and so I know you know who I am. Half-man, most have just called me imp or dwarf. I haven't heard half-man before." "It's your title," the ghost told him, like it was something he should have known already. But he didn't see it like that. "It's a name just like the others that have been attached to me." "No, it's a title, one that is to be respected." "Why?" Tyrion asked. "It's just another way of saying what I am. A dwarf." And while he did wear that fact-like armor, there were cracks in the armor. The ghost seemed to sigh. "How the Lannisters and the Westerlands have fallen," he seemed to lament. That aroused the ire of the Master of Laws. He might be a dwarf, but he was still a Lannister, and he was proud of his house. Since you have apparently been blind for the past couple of decades, I will have you know that my father has brought our house back from the brink to being one of the strongest in the Seven Kingdoms. But not the strongest, correct? The ghost asked, with a sharp smirk on his partially hidden mouth. And that has happened to many houses throughout time, so it really isn't that should make someone be in awe of the man. Besides, the Lannisters have fallen far. Time was that being a half-man in House Lannister was something that was treated and looked on with respect and honor. The ire disappeared and was replaced with curiosity. I have never heard of such a thing, and I have read all the books about my house in Casterly Rock. That's because after your house started coming from the female line, the books were edited, changed, or outright destroyed to prevent any mention of previous half-men. I was always disappointed in the Lannisters after that. Tyrion was silent for a few seconds, thinking over what he had heard. Lord Ghost, may I ask you another question? He finally asked. I am not a lord, that should be obvious, the ghost replied. But go ahead. Why would being a dwarf be something of respect in my house in the Westerlands before the changes? Simple, because your ancestor was a dwarf, he said. Which ancestor? I have several, said the Master of Laws with a grin on his face. The one who your house is named after, he answered. Lenny the Clever was born Lan Hill, a bastard dwarf of the head of House Casterly. Out of all the possible answers he could have heard, that had been the one he never thought he would hear. You jape, he accused the ghost, who only seemed amused by the words. Of course not. I helped the man take control of Casterly Rock and watched as he ousted his old family for his new one. Although I can say that he was a bit vain. The name he gave his new house meant of the line of land in the old language. He took the sigil of the Casterlys, their sword, and their words, but he changed the name. After he died and another dwarf was born into the Lannisters, they would always be seen as Lan, come again, at least the clever ones. And what caused the change? If it was such an honor to be a dwarf in the House of Lannisters, why did it become a disgrace? It happened after the Andals invade. The Lannisters had been whittled down to a single woman who was rather weak-willed and had married a man of House Gardner who turned out to be a snob and a prude. When she bore a dwarf son, he looked down on him with disgust, and she followed his example. When a second son was born to them, he got the inheritance and started the changes. As he spoke, the ghost looked at him. You remind me of him. Pardon? He said. That remark came out of nowhere, and he was caught off guard by it. I said that you remind me of Lan. Tried to keep up in this conversation. He was unsure if what the cloaked man was saying was flattery or not. I do not think that Lan the Clever would have had the same problems I have faced. You mean the tension and problems between you and his father? Why do you think he tricked the Casterlys out of the rock in the first place? And besides, things between you and Tywin could be a lot worse. And how would you know that? Because I made sure that they weren't, he said with that sharp grin on his face again. Never let your height get in the way of what you can do, half-man. I never do, Tyrion replied. Well, it never hurts to hear advice again. I would say it would depend on the advice. Fair enough of a point, the ghost conceded. Have you come to make an offer with me? The stories of the ghost's offers were known throughout Westeros, from Aegon the Conqueror to his own uncle. The offer Jerian had taken was that he would be the one to find Brightrow, but he would not be the one to return it to his family. Why? Do you need an offer to be made? He asked, only to get silence as an answer. I thought not. Now, don't you have a meeting to get to? He knew that was the case, and quickly hurried on. Never once looking back at the ghost, he already read the tales about how he would vanish in the space of a single second. He reached the door leading to the small council hall, and greeted the two Kingsguards standing outside. Sar Wolf, Sar Hound, he said to Brandon Stark and Sandor Clegane, who was the newest member of the Kingsguard after Sar Hightower had passed on, and who had followed Stark's example of not being a knight. Lord Imp, Brandon said back, you're the last to arrive. Yes, I do apologize for that. I was detained by a conversation I had with a man in a rather filthy cloak. He walked through the door without saying anything else. But he did see the look on the White Wolf's face. He was quite surprised to see that the entire small council was not there. Only the king, the Hand, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, and surprisingly enough, the Master of Ships, along with the Master of Whispers. Pardon my tardiness, your grace, he said to King Aegon, who sat at the head of the table with the crown of Jane Tyrus on his brow. The call for a small council meeting during the evening had surprised me. Are the others going to be arriving soon? No, you are the last one to arrive, Lord Roderick Harlaw, the hand of the king told him. And this is not a meeting of the small council, officially at least. Then that meant it was unofficial, and things were usually much more interesting when it was unofficial. I see. And what is the topic of discussion of this non-existent meeting? The king has wished to change some laws of the Seven Kingdoms. And as you are the master of laws, you are required here, Stannis Baratheon, the master of ships told him. Lord Stannis has misinformed you, my lord, King Aegon told him. The laws do not deal with the Seven Kingdoms, rather they deal with my family. And I don't mean to change them, but abolish them outright and replace them with a completely different law. Oh? He looked at his king. What laws would those be, your grace? The succession laws laid down by Aegon the Dragonbringer, the king answered. Oh, that would be a tricky situation. The laws of succession made by Aegon III were a result of a conflict between Aegon II and his elder sister Rhaenyra that almost escalated into a war. When he became king, and despite being the son of Rhaenyra, Aegon III issued new laws that put all female claimants behind male ones in the matter of succession to the Iron Throne, supposedly to avoid another conflict. Ironically enough, it was because of those laws that the Blackfyre rebellions occurred. Now is the time to tread lightly, Tyrion thought to himself. Might I be able to guess the laws you wish to replace them with? My, have you received the gift of foresight, my lord? Varys, the master of whispers for Aerys the Martyr King, Rhaegar the Bard King, and now Aegon, said with a giggle. No, but I do know who the king's children are, he replied. Even though the Seven Kingdoms had long hoped for a prince, all the king had sired were princesses. Rhaenyra, the eldest, was known to be as gentle as her grandmother Elia, but could be as fierce as her mother Asha, and Rhaenyra was as calm as her mother. Maya, but had a wit about her she got from Rhaenyra and Lyanna. You do not need to guess, Lord Tyrion, King Aegon told him. I mean to have them replaced with the Dornish laws of inheritance. Do you mean for that to happen for all of Westeros, or just the royal family, your grace, he asked. Just the royal family. I'll leave changing the laws of successions for the rest of the Seven Kingdoms to one of my heirs, he said with a small grin on his face. There were times when the king could act boyish. Your grace, my little birds have brought me whispers of nobles who wish to better themselves in the game, Varys told him. That is all new, Lord Varys Roderick Harlaw, the Hand told him. Nobles have been trying to better themselves even before the Targaryens invaded Westeros. That is true, my Lord Hand, but these nobles have been encouraging their sons to try and woo the king's daughters. Perhaps they might be more aggressive if they were to learn of the changes in law. If that is true, we won't have to worry about it being one of the main Tyrell family members, Tyrion remarked. Apparently, the story was that when Garland Tyrell went to serve a second term on the Wall, Willis went with him. When the two of them returned, Willis was married to a skin changer who had a shadow cat for a partner, and that she had stolen him rather than he stealing her. That would have been an amusing story if he did not know of a similar incident at Crakehall, where a skin changer with a boar partner made off with Strongboar's sister. Thankfully, she fell in love with the skin changer and stayed with him. But now that the elder two sons of Max Tyrell were married and the youngest was on the Wall permanently, they really couldn't angle to make one of their own king, unless they went with one of the lower branches, which, considering the Lord of Highgarden, wasn't likely. There was also the matter of the queens themselves, Stannis said, from where he sat, and everyone knew he was referring to the fact that both Asha and Maya were pregnant. If one of them bears a son, some nobles might try to crown him when you pass on, your grace. Forgive me, Lord Stannis, but when did you become the master of laws in my place? Tyrion asked with a smirk on his face. He could hear Stannis grind his teeth. A jape, my lord, a jape, he told the Lord of Storm's End, the smirk still on his face. Enough, the king told the two of them forcefully. Lord Stannis, would you be able to give the names of any nobles who might try that very action should a son be born to me? No, your grace, he answered. I was just offering the point. And if you do have a son, I am sure the spider would be able to find some who would try to crown him. You flatter me, Lord Stannis, Varys said with a giggle. Whether I am to have a son has no bearing on this meeting, King Aegon told him. Both Asha and Maya are early in their pregnancies. Besides, is there anyone in this room who can deny the fact that Nyas would be a good queen? They all fell silent because they could not, ever since she had been old enough to do so. Princess Noxley had sat on the small council to watch and observe. She also learned how to man a ship, which led to her belief in the ideal of the Seven Kingdoms being like a ship. She wasn't afraid to grab an axe and fight any battle that came at her. Her reign will be troubled and hard, Sir Barristan finally said. People will doubt and trouble her. Every king's reign is like that, his king replied. What would make a queen's reign be any different? Your Grace, may I ask a question? Tyrion asked him, getting a nod of acknowledgement. Why are you worrying about this now? It is only the 3rd year of your reign, and you are not sick or weak in any way that would end your life sooner than expected. I have been getting more and more ravens from Jon. Attacks on the wall are becoming more and more frequent. I thought that the Night's Watch had made peace with the Wildings. Roderick said to him. They have. Silence fell between them all as those words sunk in. You mean to say the others are attacking the wall? Daenerys asked. But I thought that those were nothing but legends. The Ghost of the North is supposed to be a legend too, Stannis said, and no one could argue with what he meant. It was a well-known story that the ghost had appeared before him just before King Rhaegar had arrived to lift the siege on Storm's End. The rate of attacks has been increasing steadily over the past few years, King Aegon said. Even with the changes Jon have made to the Watch, I am afraid that the time when the entire 7 kingdoms will have to go up to the wall to help defend it will come soon. If that does happen, I want to be sure that Westeros will not fall into chaos over a successor. It was a chilling thought, especially in how he said it. But they could not deny what he said was true. It was beginning to seem that they would get a report from the wall more and more often. They all had the same news with different variations. They were attacked and how much was damaged, whether it was the wall, buildings, or human lives. Your Grace, Tyrion began. If you wish to change the laws for these reasons, I cannot find any reason to object to them. But might I suggest that we do not issue them right away? Instead, we have Princess Daenerys attend court in your stead and let her take the reins, as it were. Let her get some practice in handling the assorted people who come to be heard and make their moves in the game. Once she gets a little polished, we start quietly suggesting that she would make a good queen, perhaps even using Lord Varys's little birds to help. Once the rumors spread enough, then we issue the changes in law. They all looked at him once he was done. Very impressive, Lord Tyrion, Roderick remarked. If I didn't know any better, I would say that you're trying to take my position. Well, it was an idea, he thought to himself, but it was only a trifling one. For now, I can assure you, Lord Harlaw, that I am not. I am simply trying to be the king's master of laws. The hand of the king just looked at him. Indeed, he said. After that, he shared a look with the king. What is that look about? Were they actually considering me to be Lord Harry's replacement? If it was, then there was a chance that he could become the 2nd most powerful person in the 7 kingdoms. He would have the same position his father had, but it would not do to get his hopes up when all he had was speculation. Thank you, my lords, King Aegon said as he stood up from his chair. I will take what you all have said into consideration, considering the laws. My Lord Lannister, I thank you especially. You've been most helpful. I live to serve, your grace, he replied, bowing his head as he got out of his chair. When the king left, his head rose back up. Things were about to become interesting in King's Landing. Talking, thinking, location Castle Black. He felt the wind blow through the window as he looked over the report on his desk. It was a normal one that didn't say anything worth mentioning later, but he still read it. When he was done, he put it down on his desk. A cold wind blew through the window, chilling his bones. But compared to those days when the long night had come again, this was nothing. He leaned back in his chair a little as the wind died away. He could still remember those days when it seemed like there would be no light of the sun again. The vast horde of the others and their rights standing before the wall was still as clear as the day he had first seen them. He could still hear how the wall and the lands around it shook when the men of the Night's Watch sang their oath in defiance, while the armies of Westeros added their voices. I sound like an old man, he thought to himself. That was when he remembered that he was an old man. He had once known Master Remain, his kinsman, and who he was glad had died before the long night occurred, to be the oldest man in Westeros. Now he was just as old. While he could still wield a sword, most of his strength was gone. His hair had thinned and turned white, which he could always make a jape about, finally becoming a Targaryen. But he was not blind. That much hadn't changed, and he still stood tall. He looked out the window and saw the light of the sun. Perhaps a walk would do me good, he thought to himself, standing up slowly from his chair. As he walked to the door, Ghost, who had been lying next to the fire, lifted his head, stood up, and went after him. To every maester who joined the watch, either for a term or for good, the albino direwolf was a miracle. They kept telling him that he should have died years ago, while the skin changers he had known rolled their eyes at such words. He stepped out into the open air of the courtyard. All the men and women in the courtyard turned their eyes to him when they heard the door to his quarters open. He knew what they were seeing: a man of legend, the last fighter of the long night and the greatest of them, according to the singers. He had been called many things in his life. Those who came from the south called him the dragon on the wall, most likely due to his being a Targaryen prince and the first head of House Icefire, as he had never actually had a dragon. The ones who were from the north called him the Winter Wolf, and the free folk called him the Crow, or, more informally, the John. He gave a small wave, telling them to go about their business. As they did, he made his way to the food hall, walking slowly, so he would not hurt anything. During the long night, he had taken a spear through the leg. It had hit nothing serious, and it healed nicely afterwards, but in his old age, that leg began to make him limp. He reached the food hall and went in to warmth. He sat down at the table nearest to the fire, sitting opposite a woman in the black of the watch. "Lord Commander," she greeted him courteously. "Is that all I am to you, Arya?" he asked her with a small smile. "I'm on watch, my lord. This is my lunch I am eating," she told him. "That doesn't mean you must be courteous to me. I am your kin, after all." She placed the spoon in her hand down to look at him. "Even if you are my kin, great-grandfather, you're still my Lord Commander," she said. "Perhaps your father should have named you Sansa instead of Arya if he wanted to please me," he remarked. One of his grandsons had named her in honor of Arya Stark, the first woman, first ranger of the Night's Watch, and his little sister, so to speak. "I have my moments that make my name well-deserved," she told him, going back to her food. As some food was being served to her commander, she looked at him again. "I should mention that there will be a group coming to Castle Black soon." "Birds or baby crows?" he asked her. Since the years, changes were made to the Watch. The free folk had begun calling those who served only a term birds, and those who were to join baby crows, while full-fledged members had the title of crow. Those words made their way over to the Watch through years, and now it was normal to call people on the wall such names. Birds, I believe. Some of them haven't flown. That was another term adopted by the Watch from the free folk, calling those who came to the wall for the first time the unwinged or wingless. He grunted in acknowledgement of the words, more focused on eating his food. It was a tradition nowadays for noble families to send their children up to the wall for seasoning. Those who served for a term would learn the things they needed to know, and those who were interested in staying permanently would be shown what that would be like. Again, it was something that came out of the changes made to the Watch. "Have we heard from your cousin and sister in King's Landing?" he asked her. We got a raven this morning." Yemen married the queen, and they're expecting either the crown prince or princess. Lyanna had joined the King's Guard, so she's finally following in her hero's footsteps. She said those last words with a roll of her eyes. He smiled at those words. Lyanna Icefire had always wanted to be like Brienne of Tarth, the first woman ever appointed to the King's Guard. It had happened during the reign of his brother, Aegon, after Ser Barristan the Bold had passed away. She eventually became the Lady Commander and became regarded as Ser Duncan the Tall. Come again. "She is certainly like Brienne, minus the beauty," he remarked. Arakia looked at him. "You make it sound like you knew her." He gave her a look. "Of course I knew her. She came up with Aegon just as the long night began. She and Lyanna are just alike, except that Lyanna is much more better looking. Every time he heard a minstrel play a song about Brienne, he could not help but laugh when they start to describe her beauty. The only thing that could really be called pretty on the Maid of Tarth was her eyes." "Oh." She was silent for a moment, and then she spoke again. "My lord, if the Night's Watch has defeated the others, why does it still exist? Shouldn't we have disbanded a long time ago?" "We did not defeat the others," he told her, his voice cold and serious. "We barely beat them back, and with many losses. Rosy Eyes, Targaryen, Oberyn Martell, Oberysand, Jaime Lannister, Jon Royce, his uncle Brandon, Brynden Tully, Renly Baratheon, Viserys Targaryen, Val and Ygritte were only a tiny number of names he remembered since the long night. House Blackfyre had joined the fight due Viserys' marriage to one of them, and was wiped out as a result. Even Bran, his cousin, had given his life to fight in the long night, just in a different way than the rest of them. "I am sorry," she apologized, having forgotten that her great-grandfather did not like to speak of the long night. "Do not trouble yourself with it," he told, going back to his food while idly tossing a scrap of meat at Ghost. Great-grandfather, did the ghost of the North fight in the long night? She asked, finally asking the question that had been bugging for the better part of 3 years now. He put the spoon in his hand down and looked at her. No, he didn't, he answered shortly. The last time he had ever seen the ghost was years before the long night began, when he gave a black Valyrian steel sword to each of the castle commanders. The rest of the meal was spent in relative silence, with only a few random things to be spoken of. When the meal was done, he stood up from the table and went back outside to the cold. He started to make his way back to his rooms, only to stop. He turned around and went for the stables instead. The nearest stable hand was surprised to see him coming. "Lord Commander, would you like one of the horses saddled?" he asked instantly. "Yes, I am going to the Godswood beyond the wall," Jon said to him. He went off and the Lord Commander waited in silence for his horse to be ready. Anyone who heard the words did not bat an eye. It was common knowledge that Lord Commander prayed to the old gods and went to the Godswood practically every day. His horse was readied for him in a matter of minutes. He mounted the horse with ease and rode it out to the gate, Ghost trailing far enough behind so his scent wouldn't spook the horse. They waited silently for the gate to open, and when it did, they rode out beyond the wall. As he rode, Jon's thoughts were on the Seven Kingdoms. Despite all that had happened during the long night, it seemed like it was all forgotten within a matter of years. The world went on with time and history. His brother Aegon died 5 years after the long night, and his firstborn daughter sat the Iron Throne, with Visenya as her hand. The Seven Kingdoms didn't seem to like the fact at first. With the exception of Dorne, some families had even tried to rebel, only to be crushed ruthlessly. Now the Iron Throne was sat by another queen, Aegon's great-granddaughter, who was married to his great-grandson. The realm may have difficult times ahead again. Hopefully, Queen Rhaenyra had steel in her spine, but that wasn't the only problem. The Night's Watch had grown strong during his time as the Lord Commander. So strong that some of the nobles in Westeros had begun to wonder if the Watch would try to break away from the Iron Throne and become its own kingdom. Such talk had spread to the Watch itself, and while it was only a minor party for now, if not handled with care, it could grow and cause trouble for the realm. And despite how they banded together and fought together, there were still men and women who felt that the free folk were nothing more than savages who had been taken in by his mercy. These problems and more haunted the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros, so much so that people began to see Aegon's reign as time when things were much more simpler and easier. He always suppressed a semi-bitter chuckle at those words. The two of them had thought the same of their father's reign when they had led as king and Lord Commander, facing their share of difficulties. It was something that would always repeat through time. People always thinking that the past had been easier. He reached the Godswood in the same amount of time it had always taken him to get there. He dismounted the horse and tethered its reins to a nearby tree, making sure it did not go anywhere. He approached the weirwood tree and Ghost followed him, but the direwolf did not stay by his side for long. Instead, he soon came to a stop and sat on his haunches, as if he was standing guard. It was a good comparison, for that was what he had been doing for the past year. It had been just more than a year ago that Jon had found the hole in the roots of the weirwood tree, and when he climbed down, he found that it led to a tunnel. He followed that tunnel until it revealed a room full of books, tomes, and scrolls. There had been a note addressed to him from the Ghost, saying that knowledge was both power and destruction, and that he was to choose what knowledge should be taken out and what should be burnt. That had been an order Jon had obeyed. Since that day, he had gone through each and every one of the books and scrolls, deciding whether or not to burn them. He had found many books of history that described things he knew for a fact didn't happen, such as the conflict between Aegon II and Rhaenyra breaking out into a war called the Dance of the Dragons that had been one for the burn pile. There was a reason why Jon had done what the Ghost had asked of him, and it went back to the day he had gotten lost in the Wolfswood. He had lied to everyone about what had happened that day. As he, the Ghost, and the direwolf journeyed back to Winterfell, the Ghost told him of what was to come, how it could prevent it, and how he would be the one to do those things. And to prove his point, the Ghost did something he had never done to anyone else. He lowered his hood and showed his face to a young Jon. Jon had believed him, especially after he had seen the face of the Ghost and went to the wall to join the Night's Watch. The things that had been described to him had come to pass, and he helped change them in ways that helped prevent Westeros from being overrun by the others when the long night came. That was why he was now down here in the Cave of Knowledge, deciding what would be saved and what wouldn't. It had taken him this long, but he was nearing the end of his task. The knowledge that was to be saved was taken out to the tunnel and left by the entrance. They would be recovered when the next batch of baby crows came sworn their vows, but he would be able to sneak a few in himself. The rest would stay in the cave and be burned by the torch he had brought with him. All that was left was a small, compared to the rest of books and scrolls that had occupied the place, group of tomes near the tunnel. He had spent the better part of the last month reading these tomes. They had started out as a journal written by a child, but that child soon grew into a boy and then into a man, the childish words becoming grimmer and darker. He was on the last tome now, the others already with the group that was to be burned. He had decided that the moment he opened the first tome and read the first page, he took his time with it, reading each page carefully, even when the words were nothing good. The wall fell only a month ago, and already the others and their armies have descended upon Winterfell. I take no shame in admitting pleasure in hearing how the Boltons died screaming. Perhaps the others have their own sense of justice, as they had killed Theon swiftly. I do not know if they have raised him, as I have heard no reports of him amongst the Rights. I hope he is, for I will gladly kill him again for what he did to Bran and Rickon. It's been more than 3 months since the wall has fallen, and the North has come under the complete grasp of the others. What remains of the Night's Watch have regrouped in the Riverlands and have sent ravens to the remaining lords and nobles in the Seven Kingdoms. I can only hope that we will receive answers that say men and supplies will come. The Iron Islands, the Westerlands, and the Vale have fallen to the grasp of the others. How they reached those lands without first passing through the Riverlands, I do not know. Perhaps they managed to freeze the sea and cross that, but I do know how they were able to take the lands. We didn't get a single reply from the ravens we sent out. All those nobles are still more interested in playing the Game of Thrones, instead believing that what used to be a story that scared children was now real. Even now, they believe that this invasion is nothing more than a remarkably trained horde of wildlings that will be easily brushed aside. It has been a year since the wall has fallen. The Riverlands were taken soon after the Westerlands, and the Vale had been conquered. I managed to lead the rest of the Night's Watch out of the Riverlands and into the Reach. I am now traveling to Highgarden to see if there is anyone who will still heed my warnings and take them seriously. Lord Mads Tyrell was an arrogant ass, and he, along with his 2 younger sons, has paid for that arrogance. The fool actually believed that he and his army would be able to swiftly end the threat of the others, only to be utterly crushed. His eldest, Willas, was more inclined to believe what I had said. But now it is too late. The power of the House Tyrell and Highgarden has been broken. Already I can see the nobles in the court of Highgarden plotting to overthrow the Tyrells and make themselves lords paramount of the Reach. What a bunch of soft-headed fools. But there was a bright spot in all this mess. Sam had met with his family again. He had told his father of what he had done, and Lord Tyrell gave him a curt nod of acknowledgement before following his lord into battle. The Reach has fallen. I am not surprised anymore. I knew it was coming when the others destroyed Lord Tysel's forces. There is some hope from the Crownlands, however. Daenerys Targaryen and her nephew Aegon had joined forces and were planning to attack the others. I am leading the most of the Watch to their side to join them in battle. Hopefully, we can finally end the menace that is the others, but if not, I have sent the rest of the Watch to Storm's End to convince the Lady Shireen Baratheon to build ships to take potential refugees to Essos. I hope she will agree, since it was the Watch that brought her back to the safety of the Stormlands when her father died on the Wall. More than 6 years have passed since the Wall has fallen. Both Aegon and his aunt have died. Their deaths came soon after the others in a display of cunning I had long suspected they had, snuck silently through the night to murder the 3 dragons in the army with freezing cold. The army was soon destroyed afterwards, along with the Crownlands. I am leading the survivors to Storm's End, so they might find a chance of safety. I thought that Mace Tyrell had been the most arrogant person I would ever meet. I was wrong. Dorne far outstripped the Fat Flower in arrogance. When I went to Dorne to beg the people there to flee Westeros for safety, they all laughed at me. The leader of House Martell, Princess Arianne, told me that they would disappear into the sands and deserts of Dorne and wait for the others to defeat themselves in the effort. Foolish, arrogant woman. These are not Targaryens or men in armor sweating beneath the sun. The others command winter itself. The Vale thought itself impregnable, and the Reach thought it could easily defeat the others. Both were proven wrong. But I have long given up on trying convincing foolish and arrogant nobles to believe in something that might change what their beliefs were. It didn't surprise me when word reached us half a year later that Dorne had fallen. What remained of the population of Westeros has created a settlement along the coast south of Braavos. Survivors from Dorne have managed to make their way to the settlement. Among their numbers were Princess Arianne and the youngest of the Sand Snakes. The princess came to me late one night and surprised me by apologizing for how she acted when I came to Dorne to warn them. But her apology doesn't matter now. All that matters now is that the settlement doesn't tear itself apart. Shireen Baratheon has proven herself to be just like her father and uncle when it came to running the settlement, for she has the steel of Stannis and the charisma of Robert. Some of the nobles still try to play the game and put themselves in better positions of power. Some have even suggested that I take command due to my supposed lineage, but both Lady Shireen and I have put an end to that. This settlement is not Westeros. The Iron Throne is no more. Everything is different. The others have struck Slaver's Bay 10 years after the wall has fallen. I do not know why, as the free cities were much closer to Westeros. Perhaps the rights they gathered in Westeros had enough of their memories to hate slavery. At least, that's what the romantics in the settlement have called it. I think that they struck Slaver's Bay simply because of one fact. There are more humans to rise as rights there. But there has been a reaction I had not expected. The free cities are uniting beneath one banner to fight the others, something that the Seven Kingdoms couldn't do. But even though there is hope in the settlement, I do not have any. Last night, I dreamed of Bran sitting amidst the roots of a tree. All these I had thought he was dead, and now he says he's alive. He told me to come back to Westeros, to come back to the wall I had fled when it fell, and go beyond it. I do not know whether or not this was just a dream, but if there was a chance Bran was alive, I would find him. I managed to find a ship and a captain who would sail me to Westeros, but only to Dorne. I will take what I can get if it meant finding Bran. Jon closed the tome. Having finished reading it, he placed it on the pile to be burned and set the torch upon it. As the pile of knowledge began to smoke and burn, he turned and went back to the tunnel. He stopped to use what was left of his strength to roll a giant boulder in front of the entrance so that the fire may be contained. He walked back down the tunnel to the hole amongst the roots. There were still problems of the wall he had to take charge of, but what knowledge he had saved must be protected and preserved. Perhaps when they are discovered, he would have them sent to the Citadel. But even as he walked back to his life, he could still remember the words on the last page clearly. I don't know how long it has taken me to get from Dorne to beyond the wall. More likely years than months. I have spent a lot of time hiding from others that patrol the Seven Kingdoms. Westeros has changed greatly since we have fled, looking more like what lay beyond the wall. I met someone I did not expect in what used to be the Riverlands. She was little when I had left, and now she was big and old. She accompanied me north and gave me time to escape when the others found us at the ruins of Castle Black. I traveled alone until I reached the weirwood tree Bran showed me in the dream. I found him beneath the tree, and in it at the same time. He told me that while I had been trying to reach him, the others destroyed the armies of the free cities and were now spreading throughout Essos. They had won. But then he told me that there was a way to prevent it from happening. He would send the entire world into oblivion, to send me into the past, to change the history. But I would have to leave who I am behind, becoming someone else, a ghost. I saw no other option, and I took his offer. This is the last entry of the Journal of Jon Snow. The 998th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, false bastard son of Lord Eddard Stark and true bastard son of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen.